Welcome to your weekly checkup. We've got a very special show. This is Dr. Lazar. Dr. Kramer is off tonight, but I have got a really, really cool subject I'm very passionate about and want to welcome you to that. So we've got a really special guest. Full disclosure, this guy has been one of probably my top leadership crush for a long time. I used to read when he was just had a blog, and then he came out with some books that helped me, and I've got more of his books, I think, than anybody else, and that says a lot because I'm kind of a junkie for that stuff. But we've got with us tonight Michael Hyatt. He's the founder and chairman of Michael Hyatt and Company, and that organization helps leaders get the focus they need to win at work and succeed at life. Now, I heard that a few times. I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds cool. It's kind of that's a neat concept. I'm sure for some people it's great. But his leadership experience helps qualify him, at least in my mind, for me to listen, because he used to be the chairman and CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers. He's also created the Full Focus Planner, which I've used for a long time. Everybody on my team uses it. And he's also a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestselling author. His books are great. If you read or follow any of our stuff, we point to his stuff all the time. So we certainly want to point you in those directions. We'll do that throughout the show and on our website. But his work's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fast Company, Businessweek, Entrepreneur. So Michael knows what he's talking about, and he's lived this out. And as with any effective leader, he's been through some of the stuff and skinned his knee and use those experiences to help others. And I personally am a paying client of Michael Hyatt and Company, and so I'm very grateful that they're willing to teach these lessons. So Michael, welcome to your weekly checkup.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that introduction.
Of course. What's that?
Part of it was true. That was great.
Right on. Well, the good stuff was, at least, right? So, I wanted to have you on because the number of years that I have been a client of coaching, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've invested in my education and then my development and professional training and things, everybody has had something to offer. But I can remember early in my career thinking that successful doctors had tons of money and tons of patients, and everybody would just fall in line. And there was a guy that really piqued my interest, and he showed pictures of himself getting on a private jet. And I thought, man, this dude is amazing. Like, I want to walk like he walks and talk like he talks, and everything's great. And then I found out he was on his third marriage and he was estranged from his kids. And I thought, that's actually not what I'm going for. And so then I kind of had this reverse thought in my head, this opposite thought of, well, I can't have a meaningful family and a successful career. I'm going to have to pick one. And so in reading through your story, I was really gripped by the conversation you referenced a few times. And we're talking through your book, Win at Work and Succeed at Life. And we'll tell our listeners how to get that later. But you talked about a story of being really high on the success ladder, getting promoted, which, I mean, honestly, I feel like we all want. And then your wife, Gail, who you always speak of in high regard, which is super inspiring, she sat you down, she had a come to Jesus conversation with you that got your attention. Can you share about that conversation and how that affected you?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in the year 2000, I landed my dream job. I was given responsibility as the general manager for one of Thomas Nelson Publishers' 14 book publishing divisions. This particular division, Nelson Books, was dead last in every significant financial metric. So it was not only not growing, it was shrinking. It was not only not making money, it had lost money the previous year, and team morale was terrible. So the CEO who had hired me to turn it around said, hey, how long is it going to take you to turn this division around? Because we're a publicly held company, and this one division is a drag on the entire company. And so I said, well, and I just like pulled a number out of the air. I said, I think it's going to take 3 years. He said, okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. So have at it. So I rolled up my sleeves, went back to the team, kind of shared a vision for what I thought we could do. And we started working. And I mean, really working hard. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week. I was working through weekends. I was working through vacations, but it paid off because we did it. So instead of 3 years to turn that division around, we went from number 14 to number 1 in just a year and a half. So in terms of revenue growth, we were the fastest growing division. We were the most profitable division. We had the best employee morale. So as a result of that, Jonathan, I got the biggest bonus check I'd ever gotten in my life. In fact, it was bigger than my annual salary. And I knew that Gail, who has always been my biggest cheerleader, would be thrilled with this. So I drove home with this big smile on my face, and I just knew that she was, going to be super excited when she saw it, start dancing, whatever. So I walked in, unfurled the check, showed it to her, and I said, "Look at this." And she was just a little less than her enthusiastic self. And I thought, that's not quite right. And she said, "Babe, we need to talk." And I said, "Okay." So we walked into the den. She sat down. She began to tear up, and she said, "You know that I love you, and I so appreciate all the hard work you've put in for this family. I really do. But I've got to be honest with you. You're never home, and your 5 daughters need you." Well, that was kind of a gut kick. I knew she was right, but I also felt kind of defensive about it. And then she continued and she said, "Even when you are home, you're not really here. Your head's always in your device. You're somewhere else. Nobody can get your attention." Well, I knew that was true. And then the biggest gut kick of all, she started to cry and she said, "Honestly, I feel like a single mom." And everything within me wanted to resist that. That wasn't what I was after. I felt terrible about it. And I thought I had reached the pinnacle of success. I had this big bonus check to prove, that I had validated my life and my identity. But what it was, as it turns out, was a false summit. And I think, you set it up beautifully when you introduced the show, because I think most people, when they're in that situation, and a lot of people, as I've discovered since I've been talking about this, have had a similar experience. Most people face what Megan, my oldest daughter, and I wrote the book together, what we call the impossible choice, where you feel like you can win at work or succeed at life. You can't do both, so pick one. And a lot of people pick working harder. We call that the hustle fallacy. They think if they could just work harder, nose to the grindstone, really buckle down, that eventually they'll get ahead and get to the place where they'll have enough time to give to their family. Then there's other people, kind of like you, where you think, "Gosh, I don't want to sacrifice my family on the altar of my ambition. So I'm going to throttle back my professional expectations and just, kind of learn to live with less than my full potential." And that's not very satisfying either. So I started thinking, what if there was a third option, an option that would give you the opportunity to win at work and succeed at life? And so that sent me on a multi-year quest to try to develop a system. And really, my entire business practice, my entire coaching practice, all that I've been writing about has been about that very thing. How can you get that third alternative where you don't have to sacrifice your professional ambition, but you also don't have to sacrifice your health, which I know is very important to you, and also your family?
It really is a phenomenal paradigm shift. And one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was just starting chiropractic school, and it was a second career for me. And so I was married and had a daughter at the time. And I mean, I still do, and we have more kids than that. But so a good friend of mine, Dr. Kurt Kelly, when I was starting chiropractic school, he said to me, "You're going to," and I was like between being a worship leader and chiropractic school, kind of this weird, thing. And so he said, "I'm going to tell you something. This is a 5.5-year academic program. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. And people will either get married, you're already married, get divorced, or have a kid. It's the hardest thing you'll do. It's a couple hundred extra hours than medical school. Like, it is nuts what you're about to endeavor on. But here's the deal. Look around. Everybody else got through it. And here's the other thing. Right now, you're a child of God, a husband, a dad, a son, a friend. He listed all these things that all of my roles, all of my hats. He said, and pretty soon you're going to be all that plus a student. And if you pour everything into being a student and ignore the rest of those, when you're done, you won't be a student anymore, and you won't be any of those other things either. So make sure that you do whatever you have to do. Man, that was the best advice anybody could have given me. And I did well in school. I was in leadership there. My marriage, it was hard on my marriage and hard on my family, but my wife, Carrie, was so supportive. And the way we did it, and here's what's weird. We're going to talk to your point about constraints here in a moment, but I had constraints on me that I chose to, like we chose to have a family, and I chose to be present as a dad and stuff. And so there were weeks I was doing 100, 120 hours a week of school, studying, working, those sort of things. And it was crazy. But no matter what, I was at home every night for dinner, unless it was exams or something. And I gave my kids a bath at night. Now, after that, no holds barred, man. I'm back in the books and I'm doing stuff like that. But here's what was crazy about that. My wife was supportive, and everyone said, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. Well, they were like going out to the bars at night and I wasn't. And so I actually did better because I had those constraints, which you speak to in the book. We'll get there in just a moment. But that was such an eye-opening experience for me. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to your weekly checkup with Dr. Kramer and Dr. Lazar. Dr. Kramer's off tonight. I'm with special guest Michael Hyatt of Michael Hyatt and Company, and we're talking tonight about the elusive work-life balance. Is it possible to do well at work, impress the people at home, grow in your relationships, and be successful in both of those areas? The answer is a resounding yes, and we want to help you know how to do that. So I felt balanced in chiropractic school somewhat. I mean, if that's such a thing. But where I really had a hard time was when we opened our practice. I finished my specialty certification. And before, if I didn't get all my stuff done, maybe I would get an A- and not an A, which I didn't like, but I was okay with it. But now if I perform more, I make more money that I bring home. And that is where I like threw the balance stuff out the window. So can you speak to that? I mean, when the reward is something that I value, right, that we value, we seem to run after it harder, at least I do. Can you speak to that, Michael?
Yeah, well, I get asked all the time, why do we have this culture of overwork? In fact, the subtitle of the book again is titled Win at Work and Succeed at Life. But the subtitle, I think, nails it. It says 5 principles to free yourself from the cult of overwork. So why is there this overwork phenomenon? Why do people like Elon Musk, a celebrity entrepreneur who advocates that you work between 80 and 100 hours a week in order to, blow past the competition? Why does that find such a ready audience in our culture? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons you were talking about is that at work, the rewards are more short-term and they're more tangible, right? So you get a promotion, you get the satisfaction of finishing a project, and that's very different from how it is at home, say, or sometimes even with your health, where progress is slower. It's much more a long-term project. There's not always, the clear markers of success. And especially with parenting, Lord have mercy. You feel like sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, sometimes 4 or 5 steps back. It's really hard to see the progress. And plus work is just fun. I mean, if you're doing something you love, it's fun. And I meet entrepreneurs all the time who say, I don't need any hobbies. My work is my hobby. Well, here's the problem. And this is kind of one of the first principles that we get into in the book. And that is that life is multidimensional and work is only one way to orient your life. So that advice you got from your friend before you began chiropractic school was so spot on. And that is you're a lot of other things besides a worker. You're probably a spouse. You may have kids. Hopefully you're a friend. You're a child. You've got parents. You've got all these other domains of life that you need to give attention to. And if you're committed to long-term success, like I am, if you're committed to multidimensional success, like I am, you've got to give attention to all these areas because they're interrelated and they flow into one another. So that if you have, and you probably see this with your patients all the time, if there's a health crisis, that can back up into your work and create a work crisis. If you have a work crisis where you're, enduring a lot of stress, that can back up into your marriage. If you're having marital problems, it can back up into your health, into your work, everything else. So these are not little seamless compartments that we can segregate from one another. They're all interrelated. So we've got to pursue balance. We've got to give the appropriate amount of time to each of these areas if we're going to experience long-term comprehensive success.
Brilliantly said. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to your weekly checkup with Dr. Kramer and Dr. Lazar. Dr. Kramer's off tonight. I'm interviewing leadership expert, best-selling author Michael Hyatt, and we're talking about the work-life balance conundrum. He's got a book out with his daughter, Megan Hyatt Miller, Win at Work and Succeed at Life. And in the book, it discusses 5 principles to free yourself from the cult of overwork. You guys mentioned a concept in the book that the double win, which to define again is winning at work and succeeding at life. Those are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I can tell you from experiences being a client of yours that one propels the other. Instead of them working opposite each other, they actually have helped me in both. And we, as a result of your input and your leadership, have actually changed a lot of our core values on our team. And one of those, I have a book out that's called Live Life Well, and that's been out for a while, but we actually have one of our stated values now on our team is live life well. And the point is, we want our team to lead by example. We believe that the world deserves you at your best. And so if you're suffering with migraines or back pain or neck pain, or your kiddos are dealing with neurodevelopmental problems, autism spectrum or ADHD or pervasive developmental disorder, any of those things, we, by gently taking pressure off the brainstem, that's our how. We allow families to realize and express their full God-given potential by not being held back from these physical health challenges. And it's like the most rewarding thing ever. So that's obviously is a passion point. And, we always feel like Schindler's List. We go home at night, we're like, gosh, we could have helped one more. We could have. And so that's noble. At the same time, if our drug of choice as leaders is not sex, alcohol, illicit drugs, shopping, gambling, if it's not something destructive like that, it's totally pernicious. This workaholism, where we think, man, we're doing the right thing. This is noble. This is our mission. This is our ministry. This is our whatever excuse you want to have. And I know personally, I've chased after first order change all the time where I feel like crap. So I'm going to go build my business so I can go buy something expensive so I can get that dopamine hit and feel good about myself again. And it's super unhealthy. But here's the challenge. We're heavily rewarded for that. Like the rest of the world rewards us. And so you guys talk about the double win, winning at work and succeeding at life, sees work and life in partnership, not opposition. I would never have agreed that that was the case until I experienced it. How did you guys figure that out?
Well, I think it became intuitively obvious to us. It became intuitively obvious to me after that conversation with Gail in the den. I realized, okay, my work addiction, and by the way, when we use that term workaholism, we're not using a metaphor. This is like a legitimate clinical problem. People are addicted to it just like they could be addicted to drugs or addicted to alcohol or sex or any of the things you mentioned. But I realized that my work was backing up into my most important relationships, that my kids were basically growing up without a dad. And I thought, I started to notice, Jonathan, that when I was at work, I was worried about my family. I wasn't fully present at work because I'm thinking about Gail or the kids or some crisis that one of them were in. And when I was at home, I wasn't present there either. I was thinking about some project at work. So I was basically never where my body was. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. I want to be fully present at work to really show up as the best version of myself so I can give the people that I work with the kind of focus and the kind of attention, the kind of creativity that they need and deserve. But by the same token, when I'm at home, I want to give my family that uncompromised focus and attention so that I can really love on them. And so that I have a relationship later in life where my wife is still talking to me, my kids still love me. And, if you fast forward till today, I think it's, borne fruit. I've been married for 42 years. My wife, Gail, and I are just, still crazy in love with each other. My kids, most of my kids, all except one daughter. So I've got 5 daughters. 4 daughters and their families live within 2 miles of me right now. The other daughter lives within 20 miles. And so we hang out all the time together. But I'll tell you what, if I hadn't woken up, back in the year 2001, after I turned that division around and Gail had that stern talk with me, if I hadn't woken up and smelled the coffee, God only knows where I would be. I might be like other people. I don't say this to shame anybody. I mean, life is what it is. Some people figure it out earlier than others, but it was through embracing one of the things that we talk about in the book is the power of constraints, and you'd mentioned it earlier, but it was those kinds of things that helped me to see that these things could work in partnership together.
And, as they should, I had a gift that occurred. It was sad by most accounts, but my mom died in January of 2020, and she had dealt with some health issues, and it was a long struggle and that sort of thing, and just consuming, what was going on. And we were very close, and my family's very close. But the gift that happened was she was my shopping buddy. I mean, she taught me the concept of if you say money can't buy happiness, you really just don't know where to shop. I mean, this thing, there's a lot of potential here. And so anyway, she died in January of 2020. And the gift for me, not to bring it down, but it really was a gift. It was like a gift from her to me, was when we said goodbye to her, she was in a hospital gown in my parents' home, and she had been dealing with cancer, so she had a wig. And then after she died, we cleared the room, and when the funeral director took her body out of my parents' home, there was this special moment, which is just so weird, but it was so beautiful also. They gave my dad the bag of her hospital gown and her wig and her jewelry. And what that meant was she left on a gurney that wasn't hers, a red velvet blanket covering her that wasn't hers. And I watched them, they so gently loaded her into a minivan. Like it wasn't a hearse, it wasn't but I sat on the porch and I watched them take her body away. And I was so overwhelmed with gratitude, which is just such a weird thing to say. Because in that moment, I asked myself, because previously, I mean, I was chasing it and building it and hustling for my own worthiness and my accolades and success and specialties and speaking engagements. And that's where I was getting my value. And I was going through the motions with this whole family thing, and it looked good, but really same thing, Michael. I wasn't present. And there was this moment where we were out to Dairy Queen with friends. And instead of us all being together and the kids playing, I was leaning up against a tree, looking at my iPhone, because I'm that guy. Right. And I look on my phone and I get an email that congratulations from the payment processor, the main one in our profession. You're in the top 25 for collections and practices in the United States. I thought, oh, that's cool. And instead of celebrating, I emailed a stupid email. It tells you really what's inside. I emailed, where did we rank? As if that is really going to matter. And I got the answer back that we ranked 13th in the nation. Now, I had been in practice 6 years at that point, and I was just crushed. And instead of being grateful and present with my family, I thought, it's not enough. We've got to do more. And so that kind of led me into this moment. And I asked myself, when my mom left with absolutely nothing that was hers, it's one thing to say this, people say this stuff, but for me to see it and experience, I stood on their porch, I was crying, and I thought, what am I killing myself for? Like, everybody says you can't take it with you. I get it. I would pass it on the test, but it wasn't in my heart yet. And that was such a beautiful gift she gave me. Well, little did I know that March of 2020, I had read yours and Daniel Harkavy's book, Living Forward, several times, which I thought was very helpful. And I committed on the first Friday in March that year. I blocked off a day like you recommend, and I did my life plan. I did the life plan. I did the thing. I mapped it out, and then mid-March, COVID hit, and it was such. I went through that with so much peace and calm, and it changed me. It changed the way our business, everything. It changed everything. That was a gift, but it wouldn't have happened, I can honestly tell you, had I not done the life plan, had I not been intentional. And you said something that struck me a long time ago. You said people spend more time planning their vacations than they do their life. And I was like, man, that sucks. Like, what is the deal with that? And so that really helped me. So, personally, thank you for that. COVID changed us. It changed everybody listening. It also changed Michael Hyatt and company. And I was reading about that, which I think is really cool. What was different for you guys because of, not in spite of, but because of COVID?
Yeah, in many ways, catastrophes, crises, disasters can be a gift. If you reframe them, or if you have enough time, you can reframe it as a gift. So COVID's been kind of like that for us. So let me just kind of set this up by saying that if you go back to that conversation I had with Gail, I actually hired Daniel Harkavy. He was my first executive coach. And Daniel said to me, he said, buddy, you were like a river with no boundaries, because I was working all day long, working into the evenings, working into the weekends. If I didn't finish by Friday afternoon, I thought, no problem. I can do this Saturday morning or do it Sunday night. I would work into my vacations. I'd get up at the crack of dawn before the family got up to process the email on my vacation in a beautiful location. I was that guy. And so Daniel said to me, you need to embrace the power of constraints. And he said, when are you willing to quit work every day so that you make space for the rest of your life? And so this was kind of a stretch at that point, but I said, okay, I'm willing to commit to quitting by 6 p.m., to being home for dinner by 6 p.m. He said, okay, great. He said, what about the weekends? And he said, do it however you want it. But he said, it's your life, but what are you willing to commit to? And I said, I'm willing to not work on the weekends, and I'm willing to not work on vacations. So Jonathan, this is where it got real. He said to me, are you really committed to that? And I said, yes, I'm really committed to that. Now, I kind of figured he was setting me up for some accountability. He was going to ask me periodically as my coach how I was doing. But no, that's not what he did. He said, since you're committed, I'm sure you won't mind if I call Gail periodically to check in with her to see how you're doing. Well, man, that was like a whole different level of accountability, because, I would probably put the best spin on it, may not quite tell the full truth, but my wife's going to give him the straight skinny, tell me exactly how I'm doing. So that was fantastic accountability. So that was like the first time that I began to experience this double win, because I was now making space for it. And so I had the evenings free suddenly, to invest in my family and to invest in friendships and hobbies, and same thing with the weekends and all the rest. But paradoxically and counterintuitively, my productivity at work began to soar, because now all of a sudden I was having to prioritize, get to be the middle of the afternoon. And before I did this, I would say, well, if I don't finish, no big deal. I'll just do it in the evening, or I'll do it on this weekend, or I'll do it over my vacation. But now I couldn't do that anymore. I'd committed. So that forced me to make better decisions at work, prioritize, and really stay focused. Okay, so that's just kind of the background and the power of constraints. And I would really urge anybody listening to this to embrace some constraints like that, to put a stop time, a quit time on the calendar for your work, so that work doesn't consume your entire life. When the pandemic began, toward the end of March, we realized that we have about 50 employees, that many of them are young parents. Suddenly they had no daycare, they had no childcare, and they were going crazy trying to keep up with work and trying to keep up with the kids. So we said, what if, as an experiment, we reduce our work hours from 8 hours a day to 6 hours a day? So in other words, a 30-hour work week instead of a 40-hour work week. But here's the kicker: we're not going to dock anybody's pay. We're going to continue to pay what we have paid, but we're going to continue this. If it works, we're going to continue. But here's how we're going to judge how it works: our productivity can't slip, and our revenue and profitability can't slip. We got to stay on plan. So after 2 weeks, we circled back, got everybody together, said, okay, how did it go? Everybody's like, oh my God, I've been more productive than I've ever been before. This is amazing. So we said, okay, let's try it through the summer. Again, as an experiment. We did. Phenomenal results. And so in September, we decided at our strategic planning meeting with our executives, we said, okay, this is now going to be a permanent fixture, a permanent benefit of Michael Hyatt and Company. We're going to have a 30-hour work week. Now, here's the cool thing. So we finished ahead of 2021. 2020 ended up 15% ahead on the top line and 101% ahead on the bottom line from the previous year. We were already crazy profitable. So we were more profitable. We grew in the middle of a pandemic, and we worked 25% less of the time. So it is possible to achieve more by doing less if you embrace constraints.
That is just so encouraging to me. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to your weekly checkup with Dr. Kramer and Dr. Lazar. Dr. Kramer's off this evening. I'm interviewing our very special guest, author and leadership expert, Michael Hyatt. And we're talking about the concept of the double win. Can we really succeed at win at work and succeed at life? Do those have to be mutually exclusive? Michael's daughter, Megan Hyatt Miller, is now CEO of the company. And I love what she, because, here we are, we're guys chewing the fat, and it's kind of expected we're going to work. It's kind of expected we're going to golf with our buddies. It's kind of expected that, I don't know, there's just this cultural expectation that we're going to do it. But what about women? I mean, the cultural norm, in air quotes, from whenever it was that mom would stay home with the kids, and so, but then we realized, my gosh, women have gifts. I'll be the first in line to say women are way smarter than I am. And so why would they not be in leadership? Why would they not be, bringing their expertise and to the equation? So Megan was at a conference, and she heard a quote from a CEO of a successful company who was also a mother with several children. There's nothing in my business so important that can't be handled between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. And I was like, man, that's a little too simple for me, but it grew on me. I thought that's really neat. And then you had hosted a call with John Eldridge, and I asked him, I said, I have a hard time turning it off, and I feel like I gotta, and he just really gently asked me, he said, well, it sounds to me like there's something you're afraid of. And I think that I'm not alone in that. And I didn't realize that was the case, but you talked about why we overwork, what is behind that. And you listed a few things. You don't have to go through all that. I want people to read your book. But can you pick a couple that you think, man, this is what we see a lot as to why people join intentionally or unintentionally this cult of overwork?
Yeah. First of all, I'm just going to comment on something you said there. I think, a lot of work at home falls disproportionately to women, even when they have full-time jobs outside of the home.
Agreed.
And it's just not fair. Thankfully, there's a generation now of women and men who envision co-parenting and both having chores in the house. And so they shoulder that together as they ought. But I think for a lot of women, they're still stuck in that kind of that traditional model where and it's one thing if you're, stay-at-home mom, but you have a career outside the home, and all of a sudden you're expected to do that plus all the other stuff that you used to have to do too. Not cool. So why do we work so much? Well, I think, first of all, work is fun, right? And that's why when I talk to entrepreneurs and I say, well, tell me about your hobbies. And they say, oh, I don't have any hobbies. My work is my hobby. I love my work. And I'd work all the time if I could. That's not a great answer. And I think the reason why it's fun is because at work, we have definable wins, right? At home, not so much. But at work, we get this sense of progress. And I've done a lot of research on happiness, believe it or not, and what creates happiness. And a lot of people think that they'll be happy when they achieve a certain thing, or they acquire a certain, piece of property or that special car, or they get that award. But the truth is, all the research says that happiness is a result of making steady progress toward a meaningful goal. In other words, you get the dopamine hits, you get the rewards as you're making progress. For people that are high achievers, achieving the goal is not that big a deal. Most of them go on to the next thing because they want to be in pursuit of something, because that's where the jazz is. That's where the juice is. And so at work, you have a sense of progress. There's clear milestones. There's clear markers. There's projects that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, take that to your family. Kids, when have they done? That's a multi-year, sometimes multi-decade project. Sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. You don't feel like you're making that much progress. Same thing if you're in a marriage that needs some repair. It takes a lot of work. And you're not always sure, if you're making that kind of process. Plus, we get so much societal acclaim and accolades from people who esteem us for our work, and that's why we have a, rampant case of humble bragging, where when you ask somebody, well, how's it going? People want to say, oh, I'm just crazy busy. And by that, what they're really saying, the message behind the message is, hey, I'm really important. What I'm doing is significant. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. They're busy because they want to feel important. They want to feel significance. But it's possible to redirect all of that and get all of that out of a more comprehensive view of life. You just have to learn to value those other things that are sort of the non-achievement areas of your life.
It's super helpful. I recall with working with a coach myself, the breakthrough I had when I kept resisting constraint. I hate constraint. I hate it. Like, budgeting sucks. Budgeters suck. Like, I just want to go do what I want. I'm on this entitlement ladder. I work hard. I should be able to, now, accepting that sounds like a 3-year-old talking. What really brought it home for me when I realized, okay, I have to change, similar to your health crisis you mentioned a couple times through your communications, about thinking you were having a heart attack and how that got your attention and those sort of things. The pain point was finally high enough, and thank God Gail didn't leave you. Thank God Carrie hasn't left me. I mean, those sort of things. And to your point about that, I say all the time, and I mean it, man. Carrie is our chief operating officer at the practice. She homeschools our 3 kids. She runs our home like a boss, and is like the coolest, most amazing wife and best friend ever. And I don't know how I landed that, but I'm grateful. And through all of those things, what finally made me say, okay, I've got to pay attention to this, was when a coach asked me, the coach asked, what would it look like if you showed up for your patients? What would it mean to them if you were rested, if you had traveled, if you were creative, if you had energy, if you had a wonderful time with your family, and I thought, man, I think I'd be a better doctor. And honestly, I mean, as sad as that is, it kind of took that for me to say, maybe I need to pay attention to this and get off the struggle bus here. You talk about the treadmill effect and all the other stuff, which was great in your book. That really got my attention. Then COVID hits, and I'm like, okay, I gotta rebuild. I had to furlough. I have to figure this out. I have to pivot. I have to all this stuff. And it was, you might not even remember, but there was a call that you did with your clients, and you said something really, really crazy to me on a Friday. I mean, to the group, not to me, but I was there on a Friday. You said, stop working, enjoy the weekend, rest, take some time off. And I look up to you and I thought, well, what a weird concept. I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have given myself permission to do that, but you gave me permission to do that. And I was actually able to rest over the weekend and enjoy myself and not feel guilty. What's up with that guilt, man? I'm not even Catholic, man. I don't know where the guilt comes from for leaders.
Well, it's kind of in the air. It's part of the hustle fallacy. This is promoted by all these celebrity entrepreneurs, and probably a lot of us. I mean, I grew up with parents. I'm much older than you, but I grew up with parents that lived through the Great Depression. And so they were just basically taught you had to hustle and grind and work for everything you got. If you wanted to get ahead, if you wanted to put bread on the table, you had to work for it. And so work became the primary, in fact, the sole orientation for life. But one of the principles we talk about in the book, in fact, it's the fifth principle, is that rest is the foundation for meaningful, productive work. And I think that for most people, the orientation is exactly backwards. They would say that work is the foundation for meaningful rest. In other words, rest is a reward for working your buns off. If you work hard and you really stay, keep your nose to the grindstone, then you can rest, then you can take that vacation. And so I kind of took a page out of the book of Genesis, where when God was creating the world, he said that evening and morning were the first day. And you see this pattern over and over and over again. So that even to this day in Judaism, the Sabbath begins on Friday evening, at sunset, and concludes on Saturday evening at sunset. So evening and morning of the first day. So the beginning of the day begins not with work, but with rest. And so how you rest will determine whether or not you win the day. Now, it hasn't been too many weeks ago as we're recording this that we watched the world or the Super Bowl, and we saw some amazing athletes out there, including what was the guy, the quarterback for
Mahomes for Kansas City?
No, for the other team, for Tampa.
Tom Brady.
How can I forget?
Go blue, right on.
Yeah. So I did some research on Tom Brady, and I said, this is amazing. I mean, he's like the oldest quarterback in the history of the NFL, I think. And, he was playing the youngest quarterback in the history of the NFL. And he basically took him to school. And they beat the Chiefs mercilessly. And so it was a great game. And I didn't really have a dog in the hunt. I didn't care one way or the other. But I started researching Tom Brady, and he is rigorous about his schedule. And the first thing they listed was the fact that he gets 9 hours of sleep a night. And we include the research in the book, but the average adult needs 8 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. I used to think sleep was the enemy. That if I could somehow conquer sleep, I could get more done. I could beat my competition. I could get my head above the crowd and really shine if I could just take that time that I was sleeping, which is totally unproductive, or so I thought, and I could turn that into work time. Well, as it turns out, what you accomplish when you're rested is infinitely more valuable than when you're tired. When you're rested, you're more focused. You're more creative. You're more attentive. When you're not rested, none of that is true. And so rest is really the foundation for meaningful work. When you've had a good night's sleep, you show up, Jonathan, at your practice, more focused, more empathetic, more, dialed into people's symptoms. You're able to perform, be more competent than ever before. But if you have a bad night's sleep, all that stuff suffers. So for those of us that are committed to work-life balance, to winning at work and succeeding at life, and by the way, not pulling back anything on winning at work, like I haven't lowered my goals. I have huge goals at work. But the foundation of that is me giving myself appropriate self-care, and that begins with sleep.
That's huge. If you're just tuning in, this is your weekly checkup with Dr. Kramer and Dr. Lazar. Dr. Kramer's off tonight. We're with special guest Michael Hyatt, and we are talking about the concept of work-life balance, and not for the sake of work-life balance, like that's not a means to an end, but work-life balance so that it can propel us into winning at work, which is important. God created us to work. We're here for a reason. We've got to have impact and legacy and provide value and those sort of things, but also succeed at life. And your book talks about it, win at work and succeed at life. Your book talks about those being in partnership, which we've addressed. And so for the people that are listening, Michael, some people are listening right now and they're thinking, yeah, that's great for them. And I could have 100 people on here right now talking about how their chronic migraines went away and the proof is in the pudding and it really works and whatever. And there's still going to be people that say, yeah, that's great. That's great for them. And just like patients ask Dr. Kramer and me, well, what happens if I don't do this? What's at risk if I don't do this? I would ask you that in your experience, having led large companies very effectively through the years, what's at risk if we don't do this? If we just keep going business as usual, keep burning ourselves out, keep seeing marriages fail, families fall apart, businesses fail, whatever, what's at risk?
In a word, everything. Let me tell you a story. Back when Gail and I had been married about 5 years, we decided to take a vacation. It was the first really big vacation we took, and we didn't have much money, but we had enough airline points that we could go to Hawaii. And so when we went there, we didn't really have any money to spend on a lot of entertainment, but we had enough money to rent some snorkeling gear. And so we took some snorkeling lessons, a hotel furnished for free. And then we went into this lagoon on Maui that was adjacent to the hotel at about 6 o'clock the first morning, absolutely pristine. And so we had taken the snorkeling lessons the evening before and we were out there the first morning. And so we just started paddling around. We weren't paying attention. We were totally caught up with everything we were seeing underwater that was on the reef. These beautiful multicolored fish, all the, different plant life that was under there. It was amazing. So we kind of lost track of time. We were so distracted by what we were seeing out of the water. Fortunately, we had a boogie board with us that we were going to put shells on if we found them. And we looked up after about an hour and found out that we'd been pulled by a riptide way out from shore. So far out that when we looked at the shore, the hotels looked like a postage stamp in the distance. Scared us to death. Gail looked up after I did, screamed and said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Man, all I know is hold on to this boogie board and swim like crazy for the shore," which we did. And it took us about an hour to get back to the shore. We stumbled up, we collapsed. We didn't go snorkeling like for another 20 years. But that has been a huge metaphor for me because it represents what happens when you get caught in the drift. When you end up at a destination you would not have chosen. And this happens in life all the time. People don't wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I think I'm going to work steadily, incrementally toward a health crisis. I think it'd be, maybe it'd be cool to have a heart attack in 5 years. Or, I want to destroy my marriage, but I want to do it just kind of like, one brick at a time, and I'll find something to do today." No, that doesn't happen. It happens when we're not intentional about our lives and we just drift to these destinations we would not have chosen. And that's how most people live their life. They're not conscious of what's going on. They're kind of asleep at the switch. They're just taking one day at a time. There's no plan. There's no design. And they end up with a health crisis, with a marriage crisis, with the crisis with their kids, something else. And the problem is that backs up into your work. Like we were talking before, it's all, multidimensional. It's all interrelated. So that if you don't give attention to these areas, if you don't have a design, and that's why we advocate in the book you mentioned, Living Forward, coming up with a life plan, because the only alternative to the drift, and I would just assume if you're listening to this, you're probably in the drift in some area of your life, but the only alternative is to design a different outcome. To begin to think to yourself, okay, if I could have the business that I would love, that wouldn't suck the life out of me, what would that look like? If I could be, in the best shape, the best health of my life, what would that look like? Get clarity on that. What would my marriage look like if it was really the marriage of my dreams? And be specific, but get clear about it. Forget about the how initially, but get clear on the vision of it, and then begin to get a plan together, to begin to design a plan and begin to incrementally work yourself toward that so you don't get caught in the drift, sucked out to sea, and risk drowning in some area of your life. So to answer your question, literally everything is at risk if you don't do that.
That makes a ton of sense. So last question, Michael, and then I'm going to tell our listeners how to get in touch with your material and what might add value to them. Dr. Kramer and I, are huge proponents of Don't wait until you get the divorce papers to work on your marriage. Don't wait until your teeth hurt to see the dentist. Don't wait until your spine hurts to see the chiropractor. Fill in the blank, right? So we are really big fans in a culture that largely says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we say, well, it is broke. And they say, well, but I don't realize I'm drifting. I don't realize I'm, so we tell people everybody deserves a good assessment. Like, our message is your nervous system controls and coordinates the function of every organ in your body, your heart, lungs, liver, gallbladder, spleen, pancreas, every single organ, every gland, your tonsils, adenoids, thyroid gland, adrenal glands, literally everything. Every tissue, every system, every cell in your body is controlled by your nerve system. And so we're saying, hey, 9% of that nerve system transmits pain. So if you're drifting through life and you're thinking you'll know when it's broke and when something needs to be done, you're going to miss it 91% of the time. There are blind spots in our health. And we say, hey, and the number of time we see the face in hands and people just losing it when we say, this is a 40-year problem you're asking us to fix. And they say, oh my gosh, I was 5 years old. I've got a 5-year-old at home. Wait a minute. And so when they go through it, they'll make a change for other people. So we believe that everybody deserves a good exam, a good assessment. Let's see, there may not be a problem. There probably is somewhere, just like you were saying, you might be in the drift somewhere. So we've got our stuff. In fact, we offer our listeners a complimentary consultation to come into one of our offices in Ann Arbor or in Troy. They can meet with one of our doctors, amazing teams in both offices. We love that. That's always kind of our MO. We just want to find out. You also have some assessments that you encourage people to take and just kind of see. One of those that I'm keenly aware of, because I do it every quarter, is a life score assessment. Am I remembering the name of that correctly?
Yep, that's it.
All right. Great assessment. We're going to put a link to that on our website at yourweeklycheckup.com. This life score assessment is basically doing like an account balance on key areas of your life. So I encourage people to go and do that. I also encourage them to pre-order your book. We'll have a link for that on Your Weekly Checkup. If you're in business, Michael's company has a program that I personally am a client of. It's called Business Accelerator. I can't say enough good things about it. Honestly, I've been with a lot of companies, and this one tops it. I'm going to let you kind of close it out, Michael. Everybody listening needs something. They want better health, better finances, better business, better relationship, better something. How can your book, Win at Work and Succeed at Life, how can that help? And who do you suggest should pick that book up, should pre-order that?
Well, first of all, I think the book is really written for anybody who feels like they're suffering at the mercy of the cult of overwork. And we chose those words very specifically, the cult of overwork, because it kind of is a religion, in our society. And if you feel like you've been a victim of that, and maybe you don't know a way out, you don't know how to get on top of it, maybe you're even cynical. Maybe you think, oh yeah, it's good for, you and Jonathan to talk about this, but that could never be possible for me. Let me tell you something. It's possible for everybody. And my daughter, Megan, and I are on a mission. Our entire company's on a mission to help people get this double win, because it's, your life is too important. The people in your life are too important. Your health is too important for you to sacrifice this on the altar of just work. Work is important. I want you to win at work, but you can succeed at life. And I think the reason, if you're caught in that drift, if the reason you're not experiencing that right now is it might just be because you've not been shown a third alternative. And this book is the third alternative. You can do this. Everybody I know can do this. So this book is I think we wrote this to give people, first of all, vision for what that might look like, and then give people very practical tools. Each one of the chapters that have to do with the 5 principles also have an accompanying practice or exercise that people can go through and incorporate that into their lives and begin to experience that double win. So I would just say, suspend disbelief. If you're cynical, suspend disbelief, give it a try, buy the book, read it, see if it's not something that makes sense to you, because I promise you, it could create a totally different trajectory for where you're going.
I love that. Well, I am super grateful. If you like what you heard, and I know you do, go over to yourweeklycheckup.com. We're going to have all of the resources that we talked with Michael Hyatt about. If you want to find information on their stuff, their products, specifically, you can always go to michaelhyatt.com. But we're going to have the links on our radio show page. On behalf of our teams in Ann Arbor and in Troy and our awesome team at WMUZ, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And Michael Hyatt, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for helping people be at their best and for partnering with us. Have a great night.